experience like this, which is much more intimate than one normally has access to. And before we move to land art, I would just like to say that the premise for the exhibition is a celebration, and that is a celebration of various different things, including an anniversary. 50 years since the first exhibition that Barry Flanagan had when he graduated from St Martin's School of Art in 1966. One of the things that happened was that the Rowan Gallery would offer a really good student, who could be from anywhere, a show. And Flanagan was put forward for this possibility by Philip King, who was one of the teachers at the school. And Alex Gregory Hood, who was the director there, had already been making inquiries about Flanagan's work because he was so excited about when he saw it in better books. So that was the sort of, if you like, the kind of beginning public recognition of what people found so exciting and dynamic about Barry Flanagan's work. The exhibition was an immediate success. There were loads of reviews all over the place, internationally, not just in the UK, from America and from Europe as well. So that kind of really launched an interest, and it also gave that kind of international scope to and access to a group of artists who were experimenting with different materials and media, and they were internationally based. And those artists all became friends, well, not all friends, some of them became enemies, but some of them became friends, and you got these different sort of network circles and groups, and we'll be talking about that when we go up to the land art bit. But the other sort of celebration, so that's 50 years, is that when Leslie Waddington, who was obviously the founder and the gallerist here, first encountered Barry's work, it was work that you see here, a lot of the works that you see here. So he was drawn to this work for a number of years before he actually started directly working with Leslie. It was work that he found extremely compelling and really exciting and dynamic, and he would get an opportunity to have a look at it whenever he could. And one of the things that he did early on to help Barry, before they started working directly together with a dealer-artist relationship, was to offer him storage space, because he knew how desperate he was for storage space. So we offered him storage space around the corner from here. And I think it's really interesting to think about that kind of practical opportunity, and also the generosity of it, and the forward thinking of it, to situate his work in that kind of context and give him that kind of situation. So if we go down now to look at the land art, and then do just talk, ask films. Do come in. So, okay, the reason I sort of thought it'd be really good to look at this particular work is because it really does situate the shared exchange of ideas and the kind of dynamic conversation between artists at this time that manifests itself in these different practices and manifests itself through the experimentation with film. That immediately kind of throws in, all kinds of shared concerns and ways of using the camera, ways of using distribution differently. And this project was set up by a German guy called Gary Schum. And Gary Schum ran what he called the TV gallery. And the work that he made for the TV gallery could only be shown on the TV. It was before the idea of putting, TVs in galleries. So you'd be sitting in your living room and you would watch the TV. And one of the first things that he did with his TV idea was he worked with young Divots, who was a friend of Barry Flanagan. They knew each other from St Martin's. And in fact, young Divots actually wanted to go to St Martin's because he was so interested in Flanagan's work. So when he got a scholarship from the Netherlands to come over, that was why he wanted to be in that place, which is one of those kind of anecdotes that resonates into why an artist's practice evolves in a certain sort of way. And the project that they did together was he with Dibbets and Gary Shum was he did this fire. So the TV at shutdown time had the fire like an open fire, and obviously the TV is a Sorrowbell fireplace. And so this was between Christmas and New Year in 1968. So into that bit when it becomes 1969, and then building on that, Gary Shum started working with other artists, including Barry Flanagan, and this one here that you see here is Young Dibbets, and with a whole range of artists, including Dennis Oppenheim, Richard Long. I mean, not on this particular one, but with others, with Lawrence Weiner and so on. And he would go on site in his Volkswagen, Gary Shum, and he went to Scheveningen, which is on the north coast of Holland, and did this film with Young Dibbets. And it was at the beginning of February, and a couple of days later, he worked on The Hole in the Sea, which you see stills from here, with Barry Flanagan, on the same site. So I'm just going to pause for a sec, because you must, please, you have to bust in, otherwise I just carry on.
Jo, when did you first come across his work?
When I was a school kid, and I used to walk down from Euston Station to the Tate Gallery, as it was in those days, and I saw Pyle. Pyle was acquired in 1976 by the gallery, and it actually was at the same time as the bricks, the so-called bricks, and Carl Andre and Barry were actually very good friends, and it was quite a distressing situation because the fuss that was made over that. It was just really, really horrendous for Carl Andre, but also they made quite a lot of fuss, the press, about the pile. But it was more humorous. There was a little cartoon of a cat lying on the top of that. So yeah, when I encountered it, I was just completely fascinated by the fact that artists were doing all these weird things. There was also a piece by Paul Bury, a kind of moving kinetic sculpture that groaned really strangely with sort of like bits like that. I'm saying, wow, will this stuff be art? This is amazing. So that's, yeah.
What was the first sand piece that you did?
The first, what was described as the first serious sand sculpture by Alex Gregory Hood, is a work that's now on show in the Conceptual Art exhibition at Tate, which is called Ring N, which was included in the first exhibition at Rowan Gallery, and it's 100 weight of is it 100 weight? It's 100 weight of sand poured from a bag. It comes in a 100 weight bag, comes out of the bag, and then scooped that way, and that way, north, south, east, and west, with one scoop. And that was, he had done other sand pieces before, but that was the one that was the first kind of one that kind of cemented in a way for him the idea of working with sand as a satisfactory and exciting material. And he made a lot of sand sculptures. And he filled bags with sand.
Yes, you see, the sand that's in the bag seems to have a very different granular quality from
it does. Yes, it does.
This
absolutely.
seems to be wetter, even dustier.
Yes. Yes, completely.
But this is presumably reconstructed every time with new sand from it.
Absolutely. Yes.
So a very precise
no, but absolutely. But I mean, some sort of, if he had wanted to fetishize the work, he would have kept that sand, this sand, and then that would have been used again. But with Ring N, he did keep the sand because that was a particularly special investigation, which he wanted to situate as being different from other sound pieces. And this can have new sound put in it whenever it's made. I mean, the bags, can be stored without sound. So for instance,
is it difficult to store them with the sound? I wouldn't have thought that was difficult to store.
Hi there. It wouldn't be difficult. Why don't you get yourself a drink? It wouldn't be difficult to store with sound. I mean, sometimes they are stored with sound. Someone from is Felix around? Because a lot of work is you could answer that.
With sound?
Yeah, work because you have work under the gallery's storage, which is with sound.
There is a piece, the piece you just described. That was kept in a crate of sand.
Yeah.
And that was the same sand kept.
Yeah.
But I think it's right to say that he specified the kind of sand.
He did.
So any work where the sand isn't kept, the sand is a very particular sand.
Yes. No, absolutely. And
in each case.
Yeah. He did specify the type of sound, and he did also specify the quarry that it should come from for that particular piece and the grain of sand. And when he had work that was showing in Paris in 1967, he tried to get the same kind of sand so that it could be installed, so that the work could be installed in the way that he wanted it to be installed, with the properties that he understood, the nature of how that sand would behave. And because he got the wrong type of sand, because the builders, there was a miscommunication and he didn't get the right type of sand, it was really chaotic and he decided to do a completely different piece. And when the Tate bought four casps, the big blue sculpture that I'm sure some of you will be familiar with, they were really worried about where to store that 1 ton and whether they actually needed to keep the 1 ton of that sand in storage or if they could buy it new whenever they installed it. And there's a whole load of correspondence, when it was being bought, and Richard Morfett is trying to persuade the committee that it's totally legitimate to get new sand on every occasion. And this is in 1976, and this is when they bought the other piece as well, when they bought Pyle. So it's the kind of conundrum that this work set that sort of precedent, so that now, in a sense, the gallery doesn't have that same inhibition about remaking.
What you seem to be saying is that Flanagan's insistence on certain materials was to do with the way they behave, not because he was, fetishizing this quarry in the way that somebody might fetishize marble that Michelangelo used for
exactly
different thing.
Absolutely.
There's a particular, if you take another artist like Richard Long, who uses a very particular kind of mud each time, but then he also uses his fingers. Yeah. And so there's a question of whether, sort of in the future, someone else could use that mud in their fingers.
Yes.
Barry's work was almost designed in a way that there are instructions that could be handed over.
Yes, can be handed over. But it's very interesting that you mentioned both. You mentioned Richard Long and his hands and those instructions, because this is an issue that he's sort of wrestling with what his instructions will be. And I mean, he and Barry were students at the same time at St Martin's and knew each other. And Barry Flanagan was actually very supportive of Richard Long and sort of taking a panel of his work and other artists' work to New York in rage at the fact that the American press had said that conceptual art was the preserve of the Americans. And so he made these panels this size with the work of John Latham, his own work, Richard Long, Bruce McLean, and Event Structure Research Group, and took that to New York and actually showed it in Lucy Lippard's loft, and also showed it in a gallery, Fishback Gallery. And that, Bruce McLean, when he talks about it in the interview I did with him, that is what actually got people interested in some of that work. I mean, Bruce's idea is that Richard Long got the exhibition that he had in Dusseldorf with Conrad Fischer on the strength of that, that kind of exposure, which actually is perfectly legitimate, because Conrad Fischer, a young gallerist, could hear from people who he was interested in that this was someone to look at. And so, it happened like this. So Bruce was saying that actually Flanagan's significance in drawing attention to artists at that particular time was incredibly important. I think that's a very interesting way of rethinking that period of time, that bit of recent history.
How do you install this? How random is it? How it falls?
Well, I think
What
I think what would be really good would be we went through a series of different operational strategies with it, and the master chef of this is Ashley, and we actually sort of had to kind of do this kind of almost like a sort of dance across the canvas without shoes on in order to enable the sand to have this kind of fluidity. So I think you should answer that.
How does it get to be in the corner of the front?
Well, we have, as Jo has articulated, we've done quite a few experiments with the sand. We started with a very small set. We followed Barry's instructions. We researched where he had acquired his sand to the original builder's merchant, which was in and around Nathan Buzzard, which now is defunct. So one had to expand on search and talk to the various organisations who run the quarries there, discuss with them the types of sand, the sort of nature and how it behaves. Eventually we found a type of sand, this particular one, that satisfied our requirements, satisfied Barry's requirements, and then it was a case of making miniatures of this and seeing if it was going to survive for 2 months. I mean, this is a long install that it's been here at Waddington, and equally I think it was up in Raven Row for about the same amount of time. Prior to those 2 events, we did a small show at Cullen & Richards over in Hackney, on Byre Street. And it was there that we simply put the tongue in the corner of the room.
How do you get it in the corner?
Oh, how do we get it? We pour it. We mustn't touch
Carry
it.
it.
Carry it, pour it out of buckets or out of trugs.
What height?
From person's height, standing height, not from up high. But one lays out sheets onto the canvas so that one doesn't tread on
It's a very physical process.
So what's the very instructions like then?
We have...
The instructions are oral. The instructions are literally oral. I spoke with Barry about this work,
Okay.
and I said that this was a really important work. It hadn't been shown since 1967. No, 1968. Sorry, it was shown in 1968 in the Rowan Gallery, and I was talking with him about it, and I said, "What about that work? Is it possible to remake it? Is it possible to show it? Because I think it really resonates now." And this was in like 2008 or 2009. And he said, yes, it is possible. And so we spoke about how to go about it and what that meant. So I think it's really important that those instructions in this particular instance are oral. Because
Are you now going to pass it on to someone?
yeah, well, exactly. So yes, absolutely.
How much is the shape determined by the instructions?
The shape is determined by the instructions in the sense that it is necessary for one's body to adapt a certain stance in order to put the work into the position that it goes. And there were photographs of the 2 times that it had been shown before, so the time in 1967 and the time in 1968. So slightly different incarnations of it.
So you don't have to get into measuring heights of
No.
mounds.
I mean, that's an absolute fundamental that you definitely don't. But but what it does is there's something which is actually extraordinarily powerful and viscous, because it's almost as if one is inhabiting the body of the artist in so making it, and making that kind of decision about how the material behaves. And then it sort of starts up this kind of dialogue about the relationship between painting and material.
I was going to say, but it
Sculpture
makes you think of how one
material.
might go about doing the same thing with the polo courses.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
when you said it was oral, have you written it down? Or would that be a correction of the fact that it's meant to be written?
I could write it. I mean, I could write it down for my writing.
But
but I haven't written it as instruction, and I won't do that.
I was going to say
No,
that
absolutely, no, I won't do that.
Yeah, because then it becomes something else.
Yeah.
There's a kind of randomness, isn't there? Because if you hadn't had that,
Yeah.
hadn't done that recording, it wouldn't have been.
Yeah.
But it's a great responsibility as well, because you are.
It's
Oral tradition.
but it's really, but it's like it's an extraordinary sort of gift. It's like a combination between the responsibility and the gift. Between the artist, the transaction, that form of transaction, the way that you pass that on, and the responsibility of that passing on, and then the possibility of encountering it.
I think the whole thing of describing it too, actually, rather than having photographs of it or a film,
Exactly.
It's really.
Exactly. But if you,
the force of the person who's being instructed, does the force of that therefore make a different shape depending on?
I would say.
Well, I think there's a funny story there. I might have thrown it a bit too forcefully at one point, and we managed to get several splots of sand stuck to the wall. And the way this sand behaves, once it sticks, it's stuck.
It's like glue, isn't it?
It's straight put. So that was the one occasion where I had ever so slightly come into contact with it, just knocking it off the wall.
Yeah, well, it looked theatrical.
It was
wasn't
right up the
Yeah,
wall. It was very silly.
It's sort of splattering.
Yes.
And have you recorded the moment of you doing this? Have you?
We have stills.
Yeah.
There's a sort of gender issue too, really, in a way, isn't it? Maybe Joey would do it rather than.
It's a wonderful thought experiment to think, 200 years hence, what will that tradition produce? And how will that be different than writing it down and doing it?
And in terms of, so Barry, did you say twice?
Yeah, Barry did it
And
twice.
how often have you done it?
We've done it 3 times.
Well, 3 times. But we jointly
I did it with you. We did it together the first time. And
It's holding the scene.
holding the seat. Yeah. Thanks. And perhaps I should say, I know it's sort of switching, but perhaps I should say that actually this was filmed in colour. And when it was shown, so what we see here was the work of a very savvy curator at the Stedelijk Museum, who, when this came on the television, which is the land art films, they recorded it. And so, because they recorded those land art films in black and white on their black and white TV, this is what the Stedelijk have. They actually also have another version of this which has sound, and then you get the Gary Shum calling out the name of each artist before the film, and you get the sound of the water. You can hear the water, and when you see the snowplow, you get Dennis Oppenheimer's snowplow very noisily revving up all over the place. But this is in colour, and it's interesting because quite often when it's referred to, people assume it's black and white, so it's often incorrectly described as a black and white film. And Flanagan himself took these photos from when it was being shown on a German TV station. He took the photos with his camera of the thing, and then made another work, which is what you see here.
Without getting any scanning lines, it's quite a trick.
Yeah, exactly. But I think this was an idea that he'd had for a really long time, which was to make a hole in the sea and to make the sea stand up and to make a sea plug.
Make the sea stand up.
Yes, make the sea stand up. So, shall we move out and have a look at some other? Well, no, not really.
No, I was just wondering if it survives in colour. You were saying, well, not really.
It survives in colour in a little bit of an interview he had on television with Melvin Bragg.
Really?
Yeah. I'd like to say over to you to ask, because obviously we could talk, and I think that it may be that the time now to change the pace a bit, and ask any and respond, whatever.
instructions for installing this? Is there a specific way you have to do it, or is it photographs, or how do you?
Okay, so now with this work, it's a very interesting difference from the one-ton corner piece, because the bags are all different. There are different sizes. So the largest ones are the green ones. They're sort of quite big, and then the next ones are these maroony ones, and then the sand, the ochre ones are smaller, and the amount of sand that goes into each is remarkable. It is infinitely more sand than one would imagine, or at least that's my experience. On several occasions when filling these, they've looked incredibly pathetic, and so also the sand itself kind of settles, and so they look even more, sad and saggy. So that the amount of sand is remarkable, and they need to be topped up. We actually, with this one, we because of having done it already several times, I kind of forewarned that you need far more sand than you think you do, and you have to fill it up more so that it actually looks over fat, which is a strange thing because you have these over fat sort of wobbly sausages. Now the wobbly sausages take on their own kind of situation, which they kind of control themselves with a little bit of help. So now this work has been installed on a number of occasions, and it's been documented in colour and also in black and white. And so that forms a kind of like a template, and that template is something that is very much in my mind or in the mind of the installer. So to recreate it in a way that doesn't coerce it unpleasantly, but does actually enable it to, find its way.
So did Barry recreate it several times?
Yes.
Himself?
Yes. Barry actually made 4 different versions of this work with slightly different colours of bags.
I see. But with the same colour scheme, he constructed it in different ways?
Yeah. With this particular one, he constructed it in slightly different ways, not fundamentally different. The green always finds its way by gravity more lower than this, which is always at the top, because of the way that it actually falls. But
when you said you have to refill it, I mean, is that appropriate, or is it actually that over the period of an exhibition it changes its nature?
I wouldn't suggest filling it. Yeah, I would only suggest filling it at the time of the install.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah, so if you
topping it up during the course of an exhibition, if it's a long exhibition.
No.
Yeah, okay.
No. You can have an install maybe lasting a couple of days, and then on the second day, if you find that it's all really saggy, then clearly, you haven't done it properly. You know what I mean? Yeah. But no, I wouldn't suggest later on. And the colours are all resonate in a kind of pataphysical, symbolic way. And Flanagan was extremely involved in pataphysics, and it was a kind of fundamental principle. He described Alfred Jarry, for instance, as his anti-father figure, and the green is a symbol of vitality and life, and the sort of the green candle for pataphysics, identifies that. So they're very particular, and the pataphysics also inform the titling of works. So when you find something called 5 casps, CASB, we're talking about 5 canvas sandbags, 5 elements. Knots are something that is of fundamental interest, and the knottiness of material property, whether it's bronze, string, sandcloth, folds, crevices, those things, they kind of feature and they become components of the work. So with a piece like this, the knots you see are like components, and the binding, the tying, really careful. And then you see the cloth here, and again you see the sort of pataphysics colours, and the spiral, which obviously spiral in the hole in the sea with the way the water goes down the, when you're draining your bath. That is a pataphysical symbol of immense significance.
What about the way the fabric changes?
Yeah, that's an incredibly interesting thing. I mean, and also gets repaired.
Yeah.
So you see the stitching, and also there is a particular version of this that was actually literally remade because it had been destroyed. Not this one. I mean, this one's been patched up. But
when was that patched down?
I don't know precisely, but about 15 years ago.
Okay, because there's something interesting for me about the lengths that you're going to get exactly the right kind of sand.
Yeah.
And then the patch is
I know.
not how it will be done tomorrow.
No, definitely not.
But it's Barry's patch, isn't it?
Which is
Yes, I know.
I was going to say, what was Barry's approach towards a finished work, you might say, for show, and the business of remaking and making it again?
Yeah, it's a really interesting. And it's also a bit of a conundrum because in some cases Barry would remake something and think that it was completely, absolutely fine and legitimate.
Yeah.
But in other cases he wouldn't, like with poor old Keith Milo when he had bought a piece called Blue Cross Arrangement, which has two little bags that go like that over each other on the floor, quite small and sort of piddly little blue sacks, this sort of width. And then in between them are the fibrous foam that is used for packing art, in crates. In between those things. And Keith Milo, the artist, he bought it from the Rowan Gallery in 1970. And when Keith moved to the States, he had the work packed, as one would. And the packers chucked the...
This will happen, yes.
And then, very much more recently, in 2009, Keith asked Barry if he could get it remade. And Barry said, no, the memory of the piece completes the piece.
On a similar thing, you can go back to what you were saying about the oral handing down of the instructions for the sound. Are you the only person that had that set of instructions? Or does
For the sound? For that sound,
Or does
yes.
anyone else?
Yes. For that particular, yeah. As far as I'm aware.
When did he use the industrial sewing machines?
He was using them when he was making all these pieces.
Yes,
So he started using those he started using that Singer machine.
That's right.
Certainly, he was using it when he was a student at St Martin's in 1965.
Oh, right, yes,
I don't know if he used it before. He may well have done, but yes.
Yes, that's my period coming in. Helping him fill the sandbags.
Exactly. Well, maybe would you like to say something about that?
Oh, well, it was just that I knew Barry very early on as a result of, later at St Martin's and everything, but he was in Cornwall, and we used to go and I'd help him fill sandbags on the beach, and then he talked about getting the industrial sewing machine.
Yeah.
So I wondered at which stage it came in, and then of course I had that little
little sack.
The sack that was left over. But
sack.
we've done that, haven't we?
We've
We've recorded that.
Yeah. I think the industrial sewing machine came towards the end, not the end of St Martin's, but 1965 definitely.
Because I really relate to the knots and the tying, and that's the sort of bit, and then you've got this industrial sewing machine.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But which came first? It seems as though, was it really sand from the beach that you first wanted to use? Because that's very much industrial.
That's
industrial.
Absolutely.
The sand from the beach was when he got the first idea.
And these don't even look like sand from the beach, but they look like quite granular, nice.
Yeah, this sand is very much the same as the sound that's in here.
Yeah.
I mean, it is actually the same.
I'm just saying when he got the ideas of the sandbags.
Yeah, and I mean, he certainly made the distinction between builders' materials and the sand on the beach. And the sand sculptures that were made on the beach had a very different feel, you know, to these works. And also the works on the beach were site-specific. And you see the line made and the circle made and the actual sand on the beach itself.
So that came first. That was the first use of the sand before the industrial sand came in.
Yes, sand on the beach. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yes, because there seems a big, big difference between the ideas and the making of the ideas in the site, so to speak, and then presenting in a gallery as a show, you know.
Yes.
And yet remaking it as well.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And the first Rowan show, the 1966 Rowan show, which was described by Jean Barrow, the American art critic and curator, as animal, vegetable, mineral, had in it a string piece that had a little bit of cloth on it that was stuck on the ceiling. So there was sand on the floor, and then this little thing coming down from the ceiling. Well, that work that was coming down from the ceiling doesn't exist anymore. But when I was having that conversation with Bruce McLean about this, that was a piece, that and the sand were the ones that really stuck in his mind, because what Flanagan was doing was like inhabiting the space of the gallery itself by making these works up here and here, and sort of creating this kind of, this kind of total situation, so that you don't just encounter one work and then another work, which, to us now seems so natural that we don't think of individual things. We think of a complete experience of walking around works, but in 1966 it certainly wasn't the case. And it's interesting that in this particular gallery, the Rowan moved from around the Sloane Square area to close to here. And it had carpet on the floor in its first, its old site, and it was a very different sort of part of London to around here, and then getting rid of the carpet, not having carpet on the floor of galleries. So, that sort of is an interesting situation for having sand, on a carpet floor.
I wanted to ask, as you mentioned Alfred Jarry as a visit.
Yeah.
It sounded like he was pretty engaged with that text. I mean, how much was Flanagan engaged with literary or other kinds of works?
He was very engaged with literary tradition. He had a collaboration, for instance, with Seamus Heaney, and he was an avid reader and also creator of poetry, specifically concrete poetry. I mean, he was absolutely steeped in it. Theatre, yes, very involved with theatre, dance. He was a brilliant dancer. He did a lot of collaboration with dancers. He worked with Marjorie Strider Company. He also worked with Merce Cunningham on a piece in Sadler's Wells. And he had a scholarship sort of funding from the Gulbenkian when he drew dancers for a period of time. But I mean, he did performances which involved dance, and he did a piece, for instance, at the ITA which involved sand and stones being moved from one side of the space to the other side of the space, and that, quite a kind of dance thing. And I found the creating this to be something performative, like a dance, and I think, one is, knackered as well.
When did he do was it in the Rowan Gallery with the metronome and the dancer dancing down the line?
Yeah.
I'm surprised to see that he studied the cello.
Yes.
In the vitrine over there.
Yes. He was very, very keen on the cello. And the cello features also in a sculpture of his called Homework, when there is an actual cello that is in the work itself, with a sofa and a cello and a mirror. But he learned to play the cello when he was a student, literally an art student, and he was really committed to it, and he had lessons at the Royal College of Music, and he got funding from his local authority, which was Gloucestershire local authority, and he had a high commendation from Frank Martin, who was the head of sculpture, to justify getting this extra funding for extra mural activity, the kind of liberality that is so outside our present economically driven situation. Yeah, and he was really particularly keen on Pablo Casals, and he also quite liked Jacqueline Dupre, and he would listen to the playing and play the Bach cello suite. And the cello was very important all his life. I mean, he always had a cello, or in wherever he was, there was always a cello there.
Within this grouping of animal, vegetable, mineral, I think that for me it's the non-human animal that in some ways is the most dissonant. And I wonder if you could just say how the beastie kind of fits into...
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting way of putting that question. The notion of dissonance, because I think that is where the hair actually arises from, this extraordinary dissonance, this extraordinary vitality. And it comes at a particular time. He starts to make the hairs at a particular time, 1979, but he is involved with the quality of the hair, the kind of life of the hair, the gamekeeper, the poacher, from much, much earlier. And so that at that point when work reaches an impasse, to turn to something which goes back again to the earth, but in a fundamental way which is dissonant from the earth that is here, but also has something of that quality of it, to an animal, which is an impossible animal to pin down.
He did see it with some hairs and boxing, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So you're saying it's kind of grounding, even as it's extremely mobile and
yeah,
elusive.
absolutely. Yeah.
And he did do representational heads and stuff before he moved into this period, didn't he?
He did, yes.
So,
when he was
but it was a live spirit of the animal.
Absolutely.
Something.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, shall we take one more question?
I was just going to, it seems to be like a bit of a burden in some ways in recreating these works. Somewhere there are rules, but then there aren't. More instructions, but there aren't. There's an objective, but then you're doing it. There's freedom to do it. And I wondered if that was kind of that feeling of a bit of burden was intentional from the beginning.
I can't really answer that. I think that's a very interesting way of thinking about it, but I wouldn't have thought that Flanagan's intentions would be to create a burden.
Yeah.
I mean, he might certainly have found certain circumstances on many occasions burdensome.
Yeah, I mean, like over time as well, like with the materials he was using, there's the kind of burden of time as well, the effect of that on each time it's resituated, it will, despite the rules, it will behave differently.
Yeah.
I think Barry challenged me at one point in terms of how to put a piece of rope on the floor. So he asked me to address the rope. And in fact, he then asked me to send the text that I produced to a curator who had also obviously had problems in how to handle a piece of rope. I mean, basically, it becomes very obvious as soon as you start to address the situation. And I don't think it's a burden at all.
No.
I mean, really.
No, it's not. It's a freedom.
He's basically saying, you do it,
Yes.
And it's not a problem.
But that takes a lot of confidence, because if you don't have it, you're liable to be sort of reduced to that size, So you have to act And that's where that idea of the gift comes in, which I think is, you know, a fundament with the work, that you have that sort of vitality.
I think with this piece, I have seen a number of iterations.
Yeah, sure,
Some
of course.
are not quite right.
No, they're definitely not.
You could basically sort of look at it and say, no, someone's been trying too hard.
Yes.
And they have configured it in a way that doesn't just sit there in a relaxed manner.
Well, he was particularly angry about one time that it was shown by the British Council. You know, not wanting to draw, you know, any kind of disparaging comments on the British Council. They do a fantastic job. But there was one occasion when he saw some photos, and he was really angry about how it had been done. You know, and he couldn't believe it. You know, like, how can anybody be so, you know, insensitive? But the poor person was probably trying so hard. Yeah.
Well, one approach is to follow the instructions, as you were suggesting, and let it be something that comes naturally from the way you do it. But I think there's the other approach is to look very hard at all the previous incarnations and try to match it up as precise as you can to what you've seen. And I think that there's a sort of danger that some curators might have of thinking, yes, you've got to just see how it was done before and just try to get it as close as you can.
It doesn't work when you do that. If you try too hard with this piece in particular, you can spend hours and hours and hours assembling it and disassembling, and each time it's wrong. On this occasion, it went together in, what, 5-10 minutes?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Then it was right.
5 minutes. Yeah,
If
it
you
was incredibly quick. And also, it's got a very sort of physical, bodily presence. Like one is kind of, it's almost like handling another person or group of people, which is quite a peculiarly uncanny
To
thing.
answer your point earlier, I think it's about 180 kilos. So
Yeah.
handling 2 people.
Yes.
About the issue of what you said earlier about the relationship of one piece to the other and how you get that, you know, the significance of the space in between as well, and how you think that through when you're setting out, when you're curating an exhibition. Is that something you have to reflect on? Or
The space between here and
well,
here.
how it all works, yes.
Yeah.
So how it
I think
together as a whole.
that's it's really, you know, I think yes, I mean the works speak to each other. So, you know, that's you know, one is conscious of trying to of kind of enabling the conversation between the works. So the conversation between this and the folds, and here and the folds, you know, with the stone and this piece here with all the layers, you know, and you know, literally how those layers behave. Then the creases here and the creases here, you know.
You can also, the hair is explained by the grey metal piece quite well.
Yeah. Very humorous. But also the metal piece, you know, that comes from 1964. So, you know, literally very soon after Flanagan started at St Martin, started in the September of no, did I say 74? I meant 64, obviously. Yeah, 64. And this is a piece of scaffold, and you know, and it literally, you can see it literally moving. You know, so if the floor is, you know, slightly bouncy,
Very gently pivoted, so any slightest touch will rock it one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's a very
When
nice,
it's such a heavy piece.
So,
it's a nice comment, well, a sort of explanation of Barry in relation to the sculpture that was going on at St Martin's, his differences, you know.
yeah.
It's almost playful, but I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, I'm not going to play Taro's game. I'm going to do a different game. But he would describe how he would describe the kind of intensity of the friendships that he formed at that time at St Martin's, and with John Latham, of course, and with other artists. You know, the other artists, and that kind of really
breakaway people from
yeah.
St Martin's.
And it's extraordinary the kind of rigidity of certain aspects of the teaching there, and the complete contrast with it as well. Because although, for instance, his irritation at Carre and his sort of intense frustration at the compulsion to formalism. He also described the kind of Friday evening classes as being meat for his imagination, and that was in 1960 when he did a short course, and he started working with a camera, cine camera. And so, you know, despite this incredible rigidity, there was this invitation to experimentation. So even with Caro and the reputation that Caro had, there was that. And then he described how he would escape to another floor to draw with John later.
Yes, and painting.
Yeah, and painting, which he wasn't able to do on sculpture